welcome to another episode of my podcast. I'm excited for today's guest, Caleb Johnson. He is the founder of Red Sea Capital and has acquired 126 units by the age of 26. And he's also a man of faith, which is awesome. So with that, let's get started. Well, we're going to start off. I stopped recording instead of switching the screen. So
No.
let's get started. Tell us a little about yourself and kind of your journey and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me, brother. And I do want to correct. It was 124 units. I mean, 2 units is not a big deal, but
Sorry about
just to
that.
clarify that. But yeah, I got started my journey when I was 18 years old in business. That was when I started. I started in multi-level marketing with Amway. I got around real estate when I was 19 years old, and I can talk more about my motivation and how I came across real estate. But did residential for 3 years, did a house hack where I lived in one unit of a fourplex in a pretty rough part of town, and have some fun stories that go along with that as well. And did a flip, we lost some money on the flip, and did another house hack in that 3-year time frame. Then I got around some apartment investors, and they really opened my eyes to the possibilities of apartments. You know, 2 things specifically. One was that if I had 6 months or 15 years of residential investing experience, I'd be just as green whenever I start in apartments. And I thought that I would take my skills in residential and then translate that to commercial eventually after like 5 years. And this guy's telling me, man, it doesn't matter how much experience you have. Just start, because it's 2 completely different businesses. And then the second thing was he showed the numbers on his first apartment. He owned this apartment for 4.5 years. And then when they sold, he alone took home $2.5 million on one property. And he didn't have any of his own money in the deal. And I thought, well, there's no way that I can do that in residential. And so if I really want generational wealth, apartments is what's going to get me there. And so in the last 3 years, I've acquired 5 apartments, 1 retail facility, and I focus on 75 plus units today. I've got a podcast as well, and just very aggressively pursuing more acquisitions.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about your fourplex experience.
Yeah, it was in Phoenix, Arizona, so a submarket of Phoenix. And the first day, man, we were moving in. My mom was helping me move my stuff in, and this guy comes running across the road through this alley, and we think a dog's chasing him, but it turns out a cop turns the corner and is chasing this guy because of a drug bust or something. And so my mom's a Christian lady, and she's like cussing. She's like freaking out. But then my neighbor, my tenant that I inherited when I bought this fourplex, there were already 3 tenants in place. One of them was a drug dealer. Another one was a hoarder that had lived there for like 7 years and there was so much nicotine and smoke residue, it was dripping off the walls. So yeah, I remember living with mice and roaches and having to go through that whole process. But no, man, it was definitely a fun journey.
Well, that must have been, a little bit jolting, I'd say.
Yeah, it was. But you learn, man, and however you can start, you can start. And if I could do it differently, I might do a little differently. But God's got a plan, so it worked out great.
You are a man of faith as well, which is awesome. Just talk a little bit about how that factors into like decisions you make in your business and kind of your mindset around your business.
Yeah, I love talking about that. That's why I'm on this earth. And so it's really nice whenever you meet fellow believers and you can kind of have that instant connection. And having partnerships, that doesn't mean I don't partner with people that are non-believers, because a lot of my partners are non-believers actually. But it just provides another opportunity to connect with people, and also that's whenever before I do anything, I want to make sure I'm in the Lord's will. And so asking God, would you have me do this? Through those moments, right? No matter kind of where I'm at, what I'm looking to do, and putting it before the Lord, see if it's in His will or not, and from there, move forward and execute.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Let's get into acquisitions and specifically underwriting. How did you get your start, and how did you learn that skill?
So uh, 3 years into my journey again in residential, I went to an apartment meetup, and that was where my eyes were kind of open to apartments, and I met my first partner there. It took me about 4 months to kind of curate and interview a handful of people that I wanted to potentially partner with. Like the first guy, the guest, the speaker who kind of opened my eyes, he had about 250 million assets under management, and so he was kind of on another level where he needed like $5 million or a 200 unit apartment complex deal. Like that's the value. He said, Caleb, if you can bring me that, let's do something together. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like I could, but at that point, I couldn't get to that point. It's almost like kind of trying to work with Grant Cardone and you've never done a deal before and you don't even know what a cap rate is. Right. And so to find someone that's like 6 to 18 months just ahead of you, so they can just get you to that next point quicker. And so I had to find a mentor that could fill that role for what I needed. And I found him at that first apartment meetup. I had thought early on that I would raise capital because for the last 3 years, starting when I started investing when I was 19, and starting off, no money, no resources, no real network of people. I had to network to actually meet people. That was one of my main focuses because I always knew that I would probably raise capital and because I didn't have a lot of money. And so I remember making it a goal to network, I think with like 5 people per day, just through social media. And so for 3 years of doing that, I had thought I had this huge reserve of potential partners I could work with. And then when I actually had a deal, my first commercial asset that I was trying to buy myself, no one wanted to invest. All the investors I curated for 3 years, no one wanted to. And I'm thinking, well, crap, that's what am I going to do? So I kind of fell on my face, and praise God, we did end up closing that, and some investors came through, and another partner of mine, he introduced me to some of his investors. So, but I really learned that, okay, for me to actually get into the space, I also didn't know how to take like people from my phone, right? Contacts, people that I've built relationships with, and actually put them into a deal, right? How do I get this contact? Let's say Kyle is my contact. How do I get a deal in front of him, and how do I even go about that process? So for me to start off, I knew, okay, I got to underwrite deals, right? I have to. You either have capital or the deal. So which one are you going to bring? Capital didn't work for me. So I decided, all right, it's got to be underwriting. And my partner, my first mentor, he was that guy. So he had underwritten about 500 units or 500 different apartments in like 18 months or a year, something like that. So he was very experienced in underwriting. So what I pitched to him was, hey, man, I'll bird dog and I'll find you opportunities. Can you teach me underwriting and I'll join your team and we can buy deals together that way. So that's how I got my foot in the door with underwriting. And it took maybe 6 months to actually do that, 6 to 8 months to learn underwriting. But that's kind of how I fell into that space.
Yeah, I think it's a very important piece of the whole puzzle, and I think it's more of an art versus a science. I mean, there are certain things that don't really change, but I feel like it's for me when I'm looking at a property, I'm trying to, I guess, I'm telling kind of a story of the property and what I expect because there are some assumptions you have to make, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
so that's kind of what draws me to it. I guess I am kind of analytical, so I guess I'm more drawn to that.
Yeah,
But I
me too.
also know that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, yeah, me too. I'm kind of somewhat of a perfectionist. Like
Hmm.
numbers are nice, man. It makes sense. right? And so if it lines up, it's I can also control it, meaning I can find the broker, I can find the financials and get the financials, and then I can underwrite. Whenever I need to kind of rely on an investor actually wiring their $50,000 to invest, that's something I can't really control unless I can sell them and really show them and present the information correctly and the opportunity. Which underwriting just at this phase right now is more suited to kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that could stop someone from, like me, from taking action. Like knowing, like you said, the controllable is it's kind of the easy part, not or the easier part, but there's a lot of unknown going, like getting something under contract, and then like, hey, will I be able to close this deal? Because
Right.
I like to know what's coming. So
Yeah. Yeah. Me
that's
too.
that's definitely a part of it. So I'm part of a capital raising kickoff. We talked about that earlier, but we're basically doing some like Zooms like once a day, and just trying to hold each other accountable, like being on social media and talking about different strategies, what to say and what not to say. And so I'm learning a ton through that. And I'm also part of a LinkedIn challenge as well, which is kind of that's starting on Monday. So I'm really trying to dive into the capital raising and get better at that. But there's also, I guess, what's kept me from doing too much of that on social media is there's different compliance issues, right? As far
Mm-hmm.
as that goes. So any tips on that? How to use social media and how does that work for you as far as um,
Hmm.
attracting investors?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kyle. And it's challenging, right? But social media is one of the best ways to do that. So I've read the book by Alex Harmozy, $100 million leads. I've heard $100 million offers is really good as well, but $100 million leads really goes into kind of marketing. And so if you post on social media every day, and I've committed to, I think I wanted to do that for like 6 months straight and see the results I've gotten. And I'll tell you, man, doing that for the last, I don't know, I think I've been doing that for about 70 days now. Doing that for the last 70 days, I've had people reach out to me and want to invest passively. Uh, a lot of that has been me trying to curate those relationships and actually DMing people on social media like LinkedIn, Instagram. And so those are how those relationships start. But then people will start contacting me and saying, "Hey, I love your content. This is great." We start a conversation and then they become passive investors. So it's just consistency. There's not really a secret trick unless you've been in the financial space for 5 years and you know a lot of wealthy people. You have a big network of doctors, something like that. So, from my experience at least, and we were talking about this earlier, I'm more of an acquisitions guy and I'm still strengthening my capital raising abilities. But what I found to work for me so far is social media and DMing people first, right? So once you connect with them, DM them, and then post content every day, right? Monday through Saturday is what I do. And relationships just build over time and you just start conversations and then they turn into investors.
Yeah, that's good. I've seen you being very consistent on social media, which is really hard.
It is.
It's easy to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this," but it's hard because for me, like sometimes I'm not sure. Okay, well, what I'm going to talk about today? Like, do I have something relevant to talk about? So this
Right.
is it's
Right.
hard, but I think it's good to. And I've also seen a lot of engagement, just being consistent, and eventually people start to find me
Right.
and reach out to me. But um, so when someone reaches out to you, how do you try to take it to the next step? Do you try to set up a phone call, or just get them on an email list? What is your strategy for that?
A little bit of both. So I have active campaign, and whenever someone clicks on my calendar link and they book a time, then their information just goes right into my active campaign. And so I'll have systems on the back end to actually track them. And whenever we do hop on that phone call, then I make notes on the conversation to kind of see what they want to do. Do they want to invest passively? What's their background? What are their goals? But whenever in that early phase of connecting with them on social media, it's just really organic. right? You're kind of learning about them, what's their experience. And I've had the most success of people that I don't, I can't DM you and say, hey, Kyle, do you want to give me 50 grand? Or have you thought about investing passively? Because so many people do that. It's such a salesy feeling. So just starting an organic conversation, one for networking, right? Kyle, I enjoy networking with aspiring and fellow investors. Do you invest as well? Right? Just a easy first message right there. And then from there, they usually give some indication about I want to invest passively. Uh, as long as you're posting on social media, you have that kind of that backing, right? And also your LinkedIn profile says something about apartments, right? In my bio, it's pretty simple. I just say 124 units by 26 years old, something like that. And so people can kind of grasp, hey, this guy's in syndication, this guy's in apartments. And so then they'll start asking me questions because often, whenever I've gone to them and say, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to actually invest passively? And I'm the one to initiate that. There's a lot, my closing rate, you could say, is a lot less compared to people that actually start asking me questions about it. So you can start sharing benefits. That's one thing that Alex Harmozy books talks a lot about is sharing the benefits, not sharing. For example, I'm not going to talk about I'm buying a 75 plus unit apartment building in a B, C class neighborhood. That's value add. The investor doesn't care about that. They care about what's my return, how secure is the investment, how do I get my money back. And so if I want to find investors on social media, that's what I need to be talking about. Not this, not you can talk about what you're buying, right? A little bit, but for the most part, you want to be talking about benefits, right? What's the reason that I should invest with you and what am I going to get out of that?
Yeah, that's really good. So I really enjoy one of the coaches in our kickoff, Ramsey. So the first of all, he talks about like being salesy. He doesn't like that, so he said it's any don't or he said stop chasing money because whatever you chase runs from you.
Yes.
So that was good. And he also another saying he has is sell the sizzle, not the steak. So like as
Hmm.
far as he said, don't go into the specifics of the deal right away. Um, talk about what it's done for the experience you've had with it and what it's done for you, and people are genuinely interested that way.
Right. And if they
So
aren't, then I have this note here that I remember. It says, some will, some won't. So what? Who's next?
mhm,
Right. Some
that's good.
will, some won't. So what? Who's next? Right. There's always another investor out there.
Mhm. Yeah, I've found that people like just having a conversation and usually eventually leads to what we all do. Like that's a thing that comes up in conversation, especially with someone we just met. It seems like always comes up. It comes gets to the point where they ask, "What do you do?" So um,
Hmm.
that's a good way to kind of get people warmed up to what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So I guess so you talked about your first deal. That I'm guessing that probably the hardest one. Like after that was probably like let's go now. Like you were excited to go find the next one. But I'm guessing that first one to get it from getting the contract signed to get it to closing time. What were some challenges you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge that comes to mind is the investors, right? So I had put up my own money. It was a 16 unit property. So I needed 7 grand for the EMD or earnest money deposit to get it under contract. So that was my own capital. And then from there, I had the finances to fly out there, do the due diligence, and at that point, starting to raise capital. But like I said, it was a lot more challenging than I thought it would be. And so, I mean, just trying to find investors, especially for that first one. That's why it's so important to build relationships, but curate those over time, right? Like if you and I meet Kyle and you and I don't talk for 6 months, but then I hit you up with a text or a phone call and I say, hey, man, I got this deal. Do you want to invest? Probably like, you might not tell me this, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, dude, I haven't, I, who are you again? Like, we haven't talked for 6 months. Like, remind me your name, and what do you do? So you can't do that, right? You've got to curate those relationships. So every 2 months, following up. If you have an email campaign every month, or send out a weekly newsletter, monthly newsletter, whatever that is, you don't want to get your investors. If you put too much information on them, it kind of kills it, right? You can't overstimulate them, because then they'll just get numb to it. So every 2 months, I do a text with my investors now. But yeah, that was really challenging, actually finding the capital for that deal. And also, what ended up bringing two investors, I only needed three that would bring 100 grand. But two investors came from my partner that was already in syndication. He had been doing this for a couple years. And so I was open and just sharing with him my challenges and struggles with that. And so he connected me with this guy who did end up investing. And then that guy brought another guy that invested alongside him. So it really came down to the wire. And I remember we pulled the extension. So whenever you buy these apartments, there's usually, let's say, 60 days to close. Once you sign contract, you have 60 days to close. And then we had like a 15, 20-day extension baked into that. I don't remember exact time frame, but let's just say 15 days. So we pulled the 15-day extension, right? So like day 55, I told the broker, hey, we need the 15-day extension. And then from there, I think like 15 days, like day 60, then is when we actually had those investors commit. So it was kind of to the wire, right? In that 60 days, we were like calling everybody, you're trying to figure this out. So that was probably the most challenging part. And then another piece was finding the right property manager to work with. So whenever you're starting investing, let's say you have your market, you have a couple property managers in your back pocket, ask them to send you a property manager agreement, which is a PMA. And so that will list out all the fees and really what the manager is going to do, the entire agreement, right? Is this like a 12-year contract or a 12-month contract where I'm tied to that manager for 12 months at least? And if I back out, there's a fee. How soon do I need to cancel? But for me, the big thing that I look for is the fees. And what happened was this one manager, they did the due diligence, they toured the asset with me. And after that, like a month after that, when we're getting nearer to the close, I ask him for a sample PMA and they send it to me. And this thing has like 2 pages full of fees, right? If the tenants run out of toilet paper and we need to fill it up, that's $100 to run out there. They get a certain percentage of all the other income, pet rent, late fees, blah blah blah. They charge you to actually drive out to the property, $20 or $95. I think it's uh, kind of high. So and there's like 2 pages of that, and so I'm thinking like, dude, I'm not going to cash flow because they nickel and dime me on fees, which you don't want in a property manager. You want the fees to be pretty simple. Usually, it's like a percentage of the gross income, depending on the size of the asset. Could be 10%, could be 3%. Just knowing whatever it is. The larger the property, the lower the percentage. And then also, they usually have some type of bonus for managers that, let's say they sign a new lease, they get half of the first month's rent. Let's say they sign a renewal, it's a $250 bonus for them. So they usually have something like that. And then depending on the company, they might, if there's late fee charges, they'll take that because they're the ones that are actually running and getting the late fees. And so there's some little things like that. But for the most part, you want it simple. There's a fee, a percentage, and then some kind of incentive for the property manager to sign new leases. So that was another hurdle that I kind of experienced actually on that first deal.
Mm. Yeah, that's challenging. I've heard people talk about that. That's one of the tougher parts of the operations side is to find a good manager to partner with. They have to be in the area too. It can't
Right.
be someone just from anywhere in the country.
Right. I will say one of our property managers, so we own 3 properties in New Mexico. One property is in Albuquerque, and 2 properties are in Las Cruces. And if you don't know New Mexico, I didn't either. So Albuquerque is probably 2.5 hours, 3 hours north of Las Cruces. Las Cruces is more closer to the border, the Mexican border. And so our property manager is based out of Albuquerque. So she manages our property there, but she also manages our property in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So it's kind of challenging on that front. It still works, but I'll tell you, it was very challenging that first 12 months. I had to call contractors and actually find contractors myself that was in Las Cruces that could do the work. So it is a lot more challenging, and I have found more difficulties with managers that are long distance. Now we're to a point where it's running smoothly. It's great, but kind of just going into it knowing some of those challenges up front.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I guess just part of the process of
Mhm.
vetting those people, like vetting any I guess any other people we go into partnership with or want to work with.
Mhm.
Definitely. What do you do to so transparency and communication with investors? Like let's say once the deal is closed, is also important from what I understand. I don't have any experience with it, but could you just talk about that a little bit? What you use for
Mhm.
communication?
Yeah, usually. So I've done it one way where we don't have a portal, and they just send me their information, and then that's just how we run it, which is a lot more time intensive. It's a lot easier if you just have a portal. So a portal that's like it's a third party type thing, and investors wire their money through there. They upload all their documents in that portal, and you as the operator send out distributions from the portal. You can send out communication to all the investors who have invested through that portal. So it's a lot more seamless. It can take 10 minutes just with one click of a button just to send distributions every month compared to going in and going through the bank account and actually doing that manually for 15 investors. So a portal is a lot easier, but we have quarterly um, video updates of the property, just saying, hey, this is where distributions are, kind of major milestones, just how the property is performing. And K1s are pretty important to make sure those are done on a timely fashion. And a K1, if someone doesn't know, is a tax document that, let's say Kyle invests with me. It's one shows how much capital Kyle invested. It also shows how much income he made from that and depreciation. Those are the basic things. There's some more information in there, but it's like a two-page document, and that's pretty much the gist. And so your CPA will put all that information together, and but there's a lot of these CPAs, they are so overloaded at tax time, right? So it's so important to that the operator sends that CPA the information they need in a timely fashion to make sure that the investors get their K1s on time. Because otherwise, the K1s can have an extension, and they might not get their K1s for can't remember the exact time, but I think it's like June or something like that, where normally it would be March. But if they put that extension in place, it pushes it out, which means that investor needs to ask for an extension to their personal CPA. And so, just getting the CPA the information they need early on is pretty beneficial, and having a portal helps with that.
Yeah, that's a good, very good, helpful information for anyone that is looking to close their first apartment deal. So before we end it, Caleb, I'd like to ask you for you mentioned a book that you've read before, but could you add a couple more that would be helpful for a newer investor?
Yeah. So there's 3 books that I'll mention. One is Best in Class by Kyle Mitchell. That is a great book on asset management. And I mean, if you want a book on asset management, that's the book. Like, it goes into the weeds. The second book would be, I'm debating what it should be. Let's go with Emerging Real Estate Markets by David Lindahl. Fantastic book. And the third one is more motivation. It's The Power of One More by Ed Milet. Fantastic book. Really talks about, I mean, the guy's story is incredible, and he's worth, I think $500 million, and he's 50 years old. So he's had a lot of success, and he started in the investing space as well.
Awesome, good recommendations. Well, actually, two of them I haven't heard of yet, but man, asset management and operations is something that's not talked about as much, but is very, very important. So I will definitely be ordering that book, and
Mhm.
I'll check out the other ones as well. So, final question: if you had to start over in your investing journey, what would you do differently?
Mm. Great question, Kyle. I would say two things. I would start an apartment sooner. I wish I would have started day one in apartments. Still, again, ton of learning lessons from residential, and glad I did that. Wouldn't change that, but if I could, right, if I could go back, I would love to have started an apartment sooner rather than later. And then if I could afford it, finding a mentor, because it took me 14 months to actually close my first property, and it doesn't need to take that long. Period. So if I had the funds to actually invest in a mentorship to kind of guide me and give me a roadmap, because otherwise I could waste a lot more time, a lot more money, a lot more brain power trying to figure it out on my own. So those are the two things I'd say.
Awesome. Well, that's a good way to end it. I really appreciate you joining me today, Caleb, and
Yeah,
look
thanks,
forward
Kyle. It was great.
to hopefully doing this in the future. So, yeah, well, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.